Thanks for staying with us. So, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu said that 24,000 children were yet to resume in the state after the first lockdown imposed to prevent the spread of coronavirus. According to him, after the first lockdown, they were still waiting for these children to return. So there is a challenge if you keep schools locked down for so long. Now, we're going to talk to a few leaders to see what their thoughts are, but I'd like to even hear Nigerians' views on this. You can send us your tweets on TVC Connect. You can hashtag your VTVC so we can read your tweets. And you can also reach us on Facebook, TVC Connect. We'd like to hear your thoughts on this because, yes, we all wanted, there were issues of, there were arguments of should school resume or should school not resume. But Lagos State that actually has the main capacity of children of poor families, we're saying that many of them were sent out to do menial works. The parents felt that, listen, school has closed. Yeah, go and start hawking banana, go and start hawking eggs, you know. So in that situation, that is a situation where the state government cannot sit down and let children who are supposed to be in school stay home for so long. I mean, I also have data that some kids even came back pregnant. Some children, some people came back pregnant. You know, because they're idle, they're home for so long. So there's a lot the state is going through. But now the question therefore is that, does that then justify the resumption? Because people are still saying the numbers of COVID cases is increasing. How do we as a people adjust to this reality?
So I would say that we haven't really seen the statistics that it's because there's school resumption, that's why the cases are rising, because it's not just the schools that have resumed. We've been coming to work. We've had organizations resume, churches have resumed, you know, businesses have opened up. So the economy is gradually opening up. And right now, because of the fact that we are naturally lagging behind in the scheme of things when it comes to education, it's not a time for us to allow our children stay back at home. They are going to lose a lot. The learning gap, I don't even know how long it's going to take us to come out of it. But that's not all the reason why we have students not returning back to school. Let's not forget that when COVID came, it came with economic harsh realities, like people lost their jobs, people who were managing on a normal day. We still have people who are complaining that salaries haven't been paid. Now, the schools tried to do that online thing with not collecting so much, but right now most of them have increased because they couldn't even cope, they couldn't pay their teachers. Now the harsh economic realities will not allow most low-income parents, so to speak, to send their children back to school. Remember that education is not free. Even the public schools, they tell you it's free, they still pay something. So it's not very easy for them to, you know, muster the money. They are still struggling to feed and survive and take care of themselves to send those children to school. That's one. Also, I just realized that a lot of parents do not trust the government. They don't trust that the government can take care of these children in schools. We've gone around to see that some schools are not even equipped for, you know, with obeying this COVID-19 protocol. So some parents are skeptical. Well, instead of my child to go to school and die, why don't I just keep this child at home? I think it's some of the reasons why we're not seeing students return to school like we expect them to.
What are your thoughts on this?
I think, because I read something online, let me just read it. Global Citizen, they're saying since the onset of COVID-19, millions of children in Nigeria have been stuck at home and they are not learning. And for vulnerable and disadvantaged children, the impact is even worse. There's now a risk that millions of children forced out of school by the pandemic won't ever return to school.
Oh my God.
Globally, according to the Save the Children, education cuts and rising poverty as a result of COVID-19 could force almost 10 million children out of school forever by the end of the year alone. So I think it's a valid basis. What I know locally, you know, where we live is not posh. Children did not go to school truly, but they went to skills. So most children used to actually have to combine skill with schooling. Most of the kids in my own neighborhood in the public schools, when they're done schooling in the afternoon, they resume at their skill acquisition places. So the one in furniture resumes there. So during the lockdown, what actually happened was that they resumed full-time in their skill acquisition. So nobody was really locked up at home, you know, staying away because Oga always had jobs to do. I really think
that... But the parents now are so drawn to the amount, the revenue that they've garnered during that period, because they don't even send them back to school, because now they feel that you're more useful.
It's not even that you're not available. So there's available hands, more hands for maybe if you had a family business. If your family ran a business you were assisting your parents with, you were more available. So, you know, parents at some point got selfish. I even felt I got selfish. Personally, I didn't have to worry about my kids traveling to school anymore, even though they were not acquiring a skill. But the truth is, if a child was to learn a particular skill for 6 years and he was schooling along with it, it will last him at least 12 years or 8 years before he will finish. But because the lockdown happened, they moved faster and parents started to weigh options. So these figures that we're seeing and the data that the Lagos State is putting out is true. It's difficult for me to admit.
I know that the Lagos State, Lagos State Subeb actually launched Project Zero campaign, and the objective was to give these children free notebooks, free school bags, free school shoes,
make
everything.
For the
make
parents.
it so just come back. So the campaign was like, go into the communities. They have their social mobilization officers going into the various communities, asking, where are your children? If you're not, just take school back, take everything, just start school. Even giving them free uniforms and everything. The idea, they got private sectors to support them, but the idea is that, what are we as a people doing to ensure? I mean, you said something before on how you homeschooled your child for a while. In this kind of situation where some parents are actually scared, and I'm talking about low income now.
Yeah, low income.
Close your mind to private.
Yeah.
Low income. How does a low income family help that child at home where they are genuinely scared of the pandemic? Maybe they have sick family members at home. They don't want this child to go to school. How does somebody like that, who might be just listening to your view today, how does that person help the child at home?
Well, the reality in where we live is they will put their child to skill. If the mother was a skilled business person, maybe a hairdresser or something, or the father was a carpenter, the child will have to learn the trade of the family. There's no alternative, because the things that me and you use, me particularly, all the online things I use, it's not at their disposal. And even though Lagos State did, the online radio learning, the online, all the methods, I followed the radio classes. Yes. I followed all of them. I tried to find more alternatives for myself. And I can only imagine, for some people, the radio, as cheap as it was an expensive commodity. And there was also the problem, because in September when they were resuming, some people I usually have to stand as their guardian so that they can have tax card to resume in the Lagos State. You know, the requirements to join Lagos State public schools is not so chicken change. Yeah. You need to get your tax card. Most of these people are artisans. They could not find their tax, evidence of their tax payments, even though they pay through their artisan association. I talked to most of them. They could not. The mechanic that I had to stand for his child, they required all of those things, and those things discourage some people from trying to put their children in school. I think they should look into the methods of registration.
I think that education is very, very important. No matter how we look at our conditions to say it's not necessary at this time, no matter the skills you learn, you need a form of basic education so that you can do well. It's like comparing a tailor, a local tailor, and a fashion designer. The difference is literacy. So it's very important that we encourage our children to go back to school. I would want the government to do more. You know, like how they were begging children back in the days to go to school with promises of lunch, sweets, biscuits, just to send your children, make the children happy. This is the time that the government needs to deploy that. And all those hidden fees that, they tell us is free education, but then you go there, you buy broom, you buy this, you buy all those things. And by the time you calculate the money, I had a friend who sent off the child to secondary school. By the time she calculated everything she needed, it was 90,000 naira, and it was supposed to be free education. All those things, you look at it and you eliminate them. The government can even appeal to the private sector to support. See, the truth is, if we are successful on our own and our neighbor is not, we are all not successful.
You read something that is very critical, that you might not even know how important it is, because education actually is supposed to be free. But the little levies we're asking is not actually from the government. Sometimes they're from all the various maybe teachers are saying, go and bring this, bring 100 naira, bring 200 naira. It's the schools, and we found out independently that some of these schools are the ones independently charging these children.
It's unfair.
When the government itself said, this thing
it's not even about money all the time. But what I was talking about, the person who is in charge of registration, they gave you a photocopy of a tax card, and the person attached a letter to it, introducing themselves as the guardian of the child. But you're insisting they go and produce the person, the person starts card and their bank details, making it more cumbersome. That's my experience. Making it more cumbersome. I had to stand for 2 children. One is going into SS1, the other one is going into JS1. That was how it happened. So these things are not usually money. Maybe when you make it more cumbersome, parents will now try to offer you something. Maybe that's the best
Let me go on a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation. And I hear Topper is in the building. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your View will be right back.
Thanks for staying with us. So, joining us now is Topper Mark Ortega. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good.
Good to have you on the show. So, we're still having this conversation on the fact that the governor has declared one of the reasons why they are having to open schools. 24,000 of these about people who refuse to return. Obviously, for many of them started doing menial jobs, or their parents used them for various things in the houses. And because if you remember, many of these international organizations and even local organizations did a lot of work to bring poor children into schools. A lot of NGOs did a lot of legwork trying to encourage children to be in school and give them all the reasons. And COVID-19 came, and many now had perfect reasons to have their children stay at home. So the question, therefore, is, we have this lacuna, obviously, in the educational sector. How do we ensure that even those who are not yet back in school can make best use of the time there? Because you are saying about menial jobs. Maybe we should now make that
part of the curriculum.
Part of the curriculum. Okay, is it carpentry work? Is it mechanic work? Do it and do it well.
And find a way to infuse education
at some point
inside.
But
So that you're able to read and write and understand the basics of the skill.
We've done that successfully.
Let me hear your thoughts on this one.
24,000 is a huge number. We already have one of the highest in terms of out-of-school children, so that already puts us at a disadvantage. There has to be deliberate policy. The government has to have deliberate policy to encourage children being in school and discourage parents from taking children out of school. So for me, at this stage, many parents, we're talking about those that have menial jobs, many parents are out of work. There's a cleaner that is literally begging me. She has 3 children. Her husband lost his job during the pandemic last year. She became a cleaner. She was a full-time housewife before, just to try and make ends meet. Those kids can't go to school, obviously. The hustle now is not for them to even get work. It's for her to have something for them to eat. So we are dealing with people that the basics of livelihood isn't covered. So some people even have work. Their carpentry work is still going on. Some people's jobs have been taken out during the COVID season, so they don't have work. So the opportunity is looking at the child like, you want to go and work, better go and beg. That's the real catchment area. The people whose children have become beggars, and begging has proven to be more profitable for the family than them going to school or any other thing. So the government it's a carrot and stick approach. You must offer carrots, give them incentives for being in school, give them school uniform, give them foods. Then the stick approach, punish parents whose children are not in school because you have the database of all these children. We need to get the children back in school because they are the ones that will become terrorize the society later if they are not well groomed.
Let's talk about the policies government has put in place that are continuing so that parents know. One of the things, like for the woman you mentioned, is a school feeding program. So when it was started in Osun State, one of the objectives was, if your struggle is to feed your child, you can guarantee your child a meal in school. And most parents put their kids in school, and it's continuing. Even in Lagos, they started it already. We also try to, government policies that I know successfully has worked is combining skill acquisition in technical schools. So this technical school at Abule Ado, I know, every kid there learn a bit of sciences and the technicalities of electricity and all of that in those schools. So you don't have to leave your child. So you do your basic education as well as acquire a skill. And their graduates are, they're the casual workers with the discos that I know of. So there are some policies that are working. Maybe parents should try as much as possible to open their minds to opportunities rather than close it up and say, I have a hardship and I'd rather leave my child. It is not going to be for any parent's gain to see your child sitting down. Even if your child was not in school. I remember mothers those days while I was growing up would drag that child to a small teacher and offer that teacher, I will pay you 100 naira.
These are different times.
Take care of
COVID-19. I mean, I was driving around yesterday and I saw these people, their masks were underneath their chin, and they're talking to the Marwa driver. Hey, having a conversation. The Marwa driver had no mask on. Obviously. So these kids are just on the roads. And are we putting them at risk? Are we putting their families at risk? So is that...
the 24,000 people that are not in school is not because of COVID.
Not be mask.
It's not because of mask. I think that
the 24,000 people, according to the governor, was after the first lockdown.
Yes.
They did not return.
Yes. So it's not based on, that's what I'm saying. It's not based on the awareness or presence of mask or fear of COVID. It's not about fear of COVID.
Money
it's about resources.
To resume,
So another thing that the government can do is to, because when we attack what we don't know, we will be trying to, if it's a rat and you are trying to use sledgehammer to kill a rat, you would end up breaking your house to kill cockroach with sledgehammer. We need to, as a government, find out what the core reason, even if it is to sample 5,000 of those that did not go back to school. Why are they not back in school? If you can do 5,000, you can use that to approximate what is the reason for 24,000, and then you can direct a specific solution to help them get back into school. The average low-level Nigeria doesn't believe there's COVID affecting them.
The problems are not new. When we talked earlier, we talked about where the parents having alternatives and the alternatives working for them. You came and you talked about now the difficulty parents, maybe to give your child transfer fare to the school was possible before, it's no longer possible. So those are some of the problems. They are not new. If, per local government, I know in Suru Alaba that the honorable member representing Suru Alaba has a boss that goes around. I'm waiting to see the one for Amu Odofi going around within those interior in Satellite Town and picking up children heading to Satellite Town Secondary School for free. But I've seen the one in Suru Alaba and I see that it works. So those parents don't worry. They just see that Molue bus, the Molue one, come around and everybody just send their children off to school. So if our concern now is to address COVID, we will not be looking at spacing those children in the bus, doing a two-time round.
I think we know the reason why these children are not back to school. Their parents cannot afford it. So while we claim we have free education, the government needs to look into that free. How free is that free education? They do not have the resources. Now, because of the COVID-19, some of those protocols of adhering to the protocols of COVID-19 in the schools, for those public schools, we've heard that some schools don't even have water.
They don't.
Their spacing is still not okay. And let me even come down to primary schools. We have about 100 and something in one class. And even if you decide to space
not anymore.
A few people come to school each day. The parents who cannot afford to pay the fees, who cannot afford to eat, would they be able to buy the face mask? So the issues are what government needs to look into and find ways to help. They may not be able, because they are looking for money to buy vaccines right now. So they may not even have the money to handle this. But they can now start looking for. There are private individuals I know, there are NGOs I know that will still come in and support. So the problem is money.
Well, the information I have is that they are doing things to get the kids back to school. They are giving out school uniforms, like I said earlier. They're giving out free school. But even they're not, as I said, education is supposed to be free. The school uniform, they're not supposed to sell to you. I'm here. Somebody was telling me now that he knows somebody that was charged at the last term. They charge them school badge, 150 naira, school tape, 150 naira, tie, 400 naira, beret. Now, these are things that you should go and get. You actually will go and get to yourself. We're not supposed to sell it. They give you the material. You go and do a source for it, however you want to source for it. But the point I want to make is that we are all saying resume. Some kids came back, as I said earlier, pregnant. There are so many other factors that are stopping children from coming back to school. Now, there's still COVID. How do we ensure those who are staying back home, for whatever reason, maybe not because of COVID, but whatever reason their parents are insisting, how do we ensure that they are actually making the best use of that time? So are we going to make them officially formalize the carpentry work they are doing, the hawking they are doing? Are we going to, how do we ensure?
We cannot allow hawking.
We can't allow hawking. Hawking obviously is illegal for
Mariah, I don't know.
But my point is that how do we make these children still, in whatever means they are in right now, make the best use of it so and do not affect them in future? We'll talk about that after the break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your view will be right back.
Thanks for staying with us. So the question is not that how do we maximize what they're doing in their house? No, that should not be. That's the wrong question. The question is, for those 24,000 that are at home, what should government do to bring them back to school in spite of COVID? That's the real question.
I think the government should come up with more incentives to attract them back into schools. They should look into the school feeding program if there's any way it can resume, because I think they've stopped because of the COVID-19. They should look into a transport system. I know that the public schools do not have a transport system. They should look into that. They need to partner with private citizens who are willing to help. They can go and start asking questions for people to come and donate, so that a school that, a parent that knows that the child will be taken to school, at least that child will have one-day meal, will be rest assured that the child is taken care of, and then face other things. So I think more incentives. If they need ideas from people, they should tell us. We can come up with more ideas on how this can work.
Okay. We've been able to agree that one of the major problems was, transportation to school. And I mentioned that some of their constituency representatives were able to provide transportation for them. But government should now look into areas. I'm sure that they have data on the schools that, they have these missing students, and look at the peculiarity of their locality. Most of them will be the increment in transportation. Prior to this, for my area now, then we don't even have public buses like that. It was Okada, and an Okada could take you to school, maybe 200 naira. But now it will cost the parent 400 naira. And if the resources of the parents did not increase, of course, that transportation will have to suffer. If the parents is not willing to sacrifice some form of, comfort for that to cover, it will affect it. So the government should look into those peculiarities and their problems locally and find local solutions to those problems. If you require that you provide the free buses, you can hire the buses that apply, or the keke napep that apply, or allow the Okadas that apply at an affordable rate for children only, and allow children get that access to school.
Okay. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so we've addressed government. Just one quick one in addition to that: BRT buses, all public transport buses should be allowed to carry children, at least for standing free. That would also ease the things. But I feel, after talking to government, let's talk to ourselves. I want to say that every individual should take ownership of every child you see around outside school in your environment. Ask, why are you not in school? What are you doing at home? Which school are you going to? Has your school not resumed? If everybody takes that consciousness and we start asking around with every child we see, we will begin to waken that urge to go to school. Don't you know school is good for you? If everybody today tells every child school is good for you, get back to school, everything will change to a large extent, because our minds will start thinking of how to find our way back into school, and that will help the government at the same time.
And help our future.
Up, let's get a few tweets for you.
So Billy Keys Mafe says, you couldn't be more correct on this, Obiajula. I know this for a fact because there's been fee increments in some schools as school owners struggle to meet structural requirements to prevent infection spread. It's truly tough, and there are no incentives for them. Lydia Real says, at Federal Capital Territory yesterday, I went for a niece's registration to GSS1. I was mute with the fee, including cutlass and buckets compulsory. Totally, I paid 140,000 just for a small class. When I asked the principal, he said, you believe in COVID, Abi? I'm lucky this school is even the least among other schools.
Okay, so let me quickly just talk about the registration difficulty. Lagos, again, is a case in study. I don't know why the principals per school insist that you can allow inter-class transfers. So we know COVID has come and our resources are lean. Parents would want to take their kids out of private schools, kids who have been in private schools, and transfer them to public schools that they can afford. And if you now say that a child between SS2 cannot do transfer, or a child in JS2 cannot be transferred from a private school to public school, such difficulty for a parent at this time should be looked into by the government. It is an existing problem. I can hit my chest and present the child I try to do it for and bring that child as evidence. I know what I am saying. You should not allow those, he says that they must come in at just one, or even SS1 transfer is difficult if they did not take the junior YF in the public schools. That's a different issue. No, if we're talking about the number of kids not in school, we should also look at the number of kids trying to leave their comfort of private schools, the cost of it, into public schools to afford education.
Yeah, the point is that, I know that government is also dealing with overcrowded classrooms. In one class in secondary school, they're having over 100 children. So there are many factors. It's not that government just saying, no, you cannot transfer. There are other factors that are being looked into. So we have to consider all those things. But the point is that I want to take a few tweets. Are you taking tweets?
Okay. So Auntie Annie tweeted, Nicola Poposi says, have you thought that parents don't want to send their children to school for fear of COVID? Do you realize the magnitude of the pandemic? Okay, so
let me quickly say that let's also not forget the teachers. Now, I know that some schools, some primary schools, the students there or the pupils there are not really excited going to school because of the frustrations that these teachers put on top of them. They do not have the incentive. The teachers are not giving incentives. A lot of them are being owed salaries. So if we want to attract these children back to school, we need to sort out the teachers. The teachers need to be happy to be able to give them that education.
Oscar says most of these children are not medically fit to attend school. They need to be healthy in order to gain education. That's an angle I didn't look at all.
Unfortunately, that's all we can take on this segment. We only hope that these peoples are somehow able to come back to school. And as I said earlier, that various state governments must do what they can to encourage these pupils back. Because I mean, it's number 3 on the Sustainable Development Goals, and it's important that education is not taken with levity. Parents and communities must take responsibility to make sure every child, especially underage children, should be in school. Let's go on the break. When we come back, the biggest news of the day, I think, the U.S. inauguration is today. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your View will be right back.